What up, and welcome to my YouTube channel Coded Design, where I teach you graphic design and software development. I am Matthew Singati. In this video, I will be teaching you CSS positioning, when to use relative and when to use absolute. Without wasting time, let's get started. I've decided to create a principle that will help you to understand CSS positioning in detail so that you can get an insight as to what it is and also how to use it. Principle number one is about the dual nature of CSS positioning. What do I mean by that? Whenever you want to use positioning, CSS positioning, you must know that you are always affecting two elements at a time. If you always think about one element, the target or the HTML element of interest, you might not get the essence, or you might not get an insight as to when and how to use CSS positioning. Let's get into details about it. Let's just go to accounting for some time. In accounting, there is something called double entry. This is what they mean by that. Let's say you are withdrawing money from the bank to buy something. So you've got a bank account that has got a figure, let's say 100 rands, and then you want to buy an item for 50 rand. Whenever you make a transaction, whenever you withdraw the amount of money, meaning that on the bank you have lost 50 rand, but in terms of asset, let's say you're gonna buy a pen or a cell phone, whatever, in terms of asset, you've got the pen that you've bought. So every transaction affects two accounts, the bank and also the assets, meaning that the cash and also the asset. So that transaction of withdrawing money affected two things. You have lost cash, but you have gained what? You have gained asset. I think the dual nature of CSS positioning occur like the same way, or it has got the same nature. Whenever you are applying CSS positioning, you must know and you must be aware of the two HTML elements that you are affecting. What are those two elements? It's the parent and the child element. It might be easier to think, let's talk about this logo. It might be easier to think if you want to position this logo to a top left corner, you just apply, let's say, a CSS property to this logo. It's easier to think that way, that I'm just gonna set the top position of this logo, let's say, to 0, and set the left position to 0. But however, that's incorrect when it comes to CSS positioning, because as much as your target element is this logo, but you must tell CSS that I am positioning this logo relative to what? For instance, in this slide, am I positioning this logo relative to the artwork, or I'm positioning this logo relative to the gray area? Then it goes back to the dual nature. So if you want to use positioning very well and understand it, you must always think about two HTML elements, the parent and the child. So the principle number one, the dual nature, explains that don't think about the targeted element or the element of interest, but think about where is this element sitting, which is the parent container of the element, so that you can apply the positioning relative to it. Okay, so number one here, I've got the parent effect and I've got the child effect. As I've stated, that whenever you are applying positioning, you must know that it affects the child and also it affects what? The parent. Don't think about one of these, but always think about two elements. If we've got a div and there is another div inside it, the div inside it might be an element of interest, but if you want to set its position, don't only think about the child, the div that you are interested in, but also think about the containing parent. Principle number two, the position effect. The position effect states that whenever you apply CSS positioning, you are affecting a lot of things. An effect will be different in a child, and also it will be different in a parent. You are affecting these two elements that we have talked about on principle 1, but you don't affect them, or the behavior is not the same. So as much as you are saying to the, and as much as you are setting the style of the child to, let's say, display the position relative, and at the same time you are setting the parent container to position relative, but the effect is different to those elements. So what is the difference? Number one, when you are setting the position of a child, just like here on number 1, when you are setting the position of a child, the first thing that you are doing, for instance, let's say we've got div 1 as a parent and div 2 as a child. So div 2 is a child, the element number 2 is a child. If we are saying div 2 position relative, this is what we are actually saying first. We are affecting the locatability of that element. What do I mean by locatability? If you don't set the position of a children, you can't locate it, you can't move it around. Number one, you must set the positioning of a child, of a targeted element or element of interest to a certain position, be it is going to be position relative or it's going to be position absolute, before you change the location of it, before you move it around inside that parent element or in the whole HTML page. So whenever you are dealing with the child and you are setting the positioning of a child, you are making it to be some sort of movable, so that you can set the top location of it, you can set the left location, you can set the property, so that you can set the bottom property, left, right, top, bottom properties. You can't set those if on the child element the location property is not there. So do you see that whenever you are using positioning on a child, the element of interest, number one, what you are doing, you are making it locatable, you are able to move it around. Let's say I've got this new child element and I'm setting its left property to 50%. Is it gonna move to 50% of maybe the whole page or a certain a div that is a parent? No, it's not gonna move. Why is it's not gonna move? It's simply because we didn't set the positioning of that child. So let's get into the practical side of it, so that as we continue with the slides, also we do the practicals. Okay, here this is my simple page. I've just got 3 containers, 3 divs, the first one, the second one, and the third one, as you can see. In fact, according to my naming of the IDs, this is the third one, this is the second one, and this is the first one. So inside the first one, we've got 2 circles, the red one and the green one. I think this one is very clear and it's understandable and self-explanatory. So where we were here, we were saying, number one, positioning effect. If you are setting a position to relative to the targeted element or the element of interest, which is a child, what are you actually doing? Before you think about maybe I want to move it to the left, but you need to understand what is it that you are doing. So we are saying on number one, you are making it locatable, or you are making it, let's say, mobile, you are making it movable. If you don't have the position property, you can't move it around. Okay, now let's go to the practicality of that. Okay, so here let's say I'm going to the red circle. As you can see that it has got ID of C1, the red circle. Now on the red circle, the background is red, as you can see. Now let's say I want to say the left property of it to 50%. 50%. You see, nothing happens. Why? Because the positioning is not there. So when I'm setting the positioning into a targeted element or element of interest, the first thing that I'm doing, I am making it like locatable so that I can move its location. That's what I mean by being locatable. Maybe it might happen, it's not a suitable word, but this is what I mean. I'm giving it an access or an ability to be movable. For instance, now if I've set the left the left property to 50%, it doesn't move to 50%. It's more like it's stationary. It's not mobile. It can't move. In order for it to move, number one, I have to set the position. For now, I'm going to set it to relative. As you can see, now that we've set it to relative, it has moved like 50% to the left. But if we remove the position, as you can see that it stays on the same place. So setting a position to a targeted element or a child element, number one, you are making it to be movable so that this style can take effect. Okay, let's just refresh so that we can remove everything else. And then number two, whenever you set the position to a parent container, remember, according to this slide, we said you must always think about two HTML elements, not one. Think about the element of interest, the child element, but also think about the containing element, which is the parent element. Now, I have showed you what is the effect of positioning on the child element. Now we are saying, now let's go to the parent element. If on the parent element you are setting the position to relative or absolute, what is it that you are actually doing? Because as I've said previously, that the effect is not the same. The capabilities that you are assigning to the element when it's a parent and when it's a child are not the same. So in a parent element, when you are setting the positioning, let's say to relative, according to point number 2, you are assigning a certain ownership to that parent. What do I mean by that? Let's go to the practical. Now, there is no positioning in all these elements. There is no positioning in this one, and this one. So let's assign number one position relative to the orange square or the middle square. Okay, middle square. And then that orange color there, let's say position relative. What happened? Nothing happened. Why? Because according to principle number 1, we must always think of two things. So now that we have set the parent container to position relative, we need to go to the child container or the child element. Now we've only made some changes to the first parent element, but not into the child element. Now let's go to the child element. The child of interest or the element of interest is going to be the red circle. Let's go to the red circle and let's set the position to relative. Okay, then again nothing happens, but we are on the right path. Now we are ready, we are good to go. That means all is set now. As much as you don't see the effect visually, but we have done all, we have dealt with the preliminary matters in order for us to understand and to apply positioning. So meaning that now all the parent and the child element are ready to interact with each other as far as locating the child around. So let's get into the effect. Let's set the top property of the red circle to 0 and see what will be the effect. At the moment, looking at this diagram, we assume that the 2 circle or the red circle is inside the red square, and visually we can say that the parent of this red circle is a red square. However, when we are setting the top property of a red square, let's see where is this. When you're setting the top property of a red circle, let's see where is this circle gonna be located. Where is it gonna shift to? Top 0. Top property, okay, something is wrong here. Top property to 0. Okay, 0 pixel. Oh, okay. Okay, the position of the okay, I have made a very big mistake. Okay, let's just go back a little bit. Okay, when we are setting, this is what we've said before. Sorry for that. I hope you are going to be able to follow me. This is what we have said before. Number one, we need to deal with the containing parent. We have set the containing parent to relative. That's good. And then when we go to the child element, setting the child element to relative, you are automatically assigning the ownership of the parent element to the first parent. So whenever we say relative here, automatically this ownership that we have assigned here to the orange box, it's overridden, it's not used, it's undermined by the fact that we are saying the circle must be relative. What is this relative doing to the relationship between the circle and the red square? This relative is saying that automatically the parent, the controlling parent of this circle, it's a what? It's a red square. That's the effect that this relative is doing. If we want to prove what I was saying, we need to change this position to absolute. Position absolute, let's say. This is a red square, position absolute. Okay, so let's just quickly go back a second. We were here on point number 2. This is what we were saying on point number 2 under the principle 2, the positioning effect. We were done with the locatability or on the child when you are applying the position on the child, but now we were when you are applying the positioning property to the parent. So we have applied the positioning property to the parent, which is this orange square, and that property, the value of the property was relative. What was relative? Positioning relative. That's what we have done. So here we are saying if you are doing that to a parent, you are assigning ownership to that parent. What do I mean by assigning ownership? You just mean that if you set the top value of the circle while its positioning is absolute, then the orange square becomes the parent. The orange square owns the circle. Now when you are saying top 0, the top position of this circle, which is this part, it will move, it will decrease. Let's assume that while it was here, let's say it was 50%, or let's say, yeah, it was 50%. Then now, as it moves, first of all, it passes through the supposedly parent, which is the red one, and it moves to 0. This position is 0, according to what? According to the orange what? Square. So the orange square has been assigned a responsibility to take care of ownership of the red circle. That's what I mean by positioning. Setting a position of a parent, you are assigning ownership, which is the positioning ownership. So this means that this red circle will be moved according to, or relative to, the what? Relative to the orange square. However, I'm using relative here not as a CSS term, but as in English, because one might ask, why do you mention relative whereas on the circle you've got position absolute? So let's continue to make some more things practical. Let's set the right let's set right to 20 pixels. You see, so this 20 pixels, it's 20 pixels according to this orange square, because now by setting the positioning the position of an orange square, we have assigned it a responsibility, or now it owns, it becomes the parent. This is not now the parent. Why this is not the parent? Let's see if does it has a position. So container number 1, which is the red one, this one doesn't have a position, so it has lost the ability, the ownership of the element inside it. Which a container that has gained that ownership, it's the orange one. However, can we gain back the ownership of this orange circle so that it can be positioned relative to or according to the red square? Let's look at that. Let's set the position to relative. Voila. Now when we set the position relative of this red square, now things change, meaning that now this circle is in whatever position, which is in terms of right, let's say it's 20 pixels to the right, not according to the orange circle, but according to what? According to the red square, not according to the orange square, but according to the red square. You see, so if we move it, now the ownership is taken by the orange one. Let's just push things further. Can we can we assign the ownership of this orange circle to the outermost container? Of course, yes. Let's do that. It will mean that we have to disable or to take away the ownership from the orange square and then assign it to the outermost container. So let's just go to the orange square position. No, this is number 1, and then number 2. Let's move this position here, move it, and then okay, let's just quickly get in here, because obviously now since this container and this one, they don't have the position at all, one might ask, why does this circle now jumps to almost here when these parents don't have like positioning? Now the default parent that gets the ownership of this red circle, it becomes what? It becomes the body. So that's why this is jumping here. It's because of this and this and this. They don't have ownership of this circle. They can't control the boundary. When I'm saying ownership, it means that this is bound by the body. If this red circle has the ownership position relative or even position absolute, it will mean that it's bound by this one. If it's this one that has got the ownership, is bound by this one. So now we were saying this must be bound by the outermost rectangle. So let's go to the outermost rectangle. Let's set position relative. So now this is bound by this one. However, this means that we can deactivate this so that the body the body element of this HTML file can automatically take the ownership. Let's see, what if we can assign the position absolute to the to this container, the third container, which is with an ID container 3. What will happen? Position, not relative now, absolute. The same effects take place. So by setting the position of any containing parent, be it you have set it to absolute, be it you have set it to relative, you are automatically giving it rights to be that parent container, to be the boundary, to be the ceiling, You can move this red circle according to the edges of that containing parent. So how do you do that? You need to set the position of the parent. It's either you set it to relative or you set it to absolute. However, on top of that, the point number 3 states that the parent, when you are setting a position of a parent, be it absolute or relative, you are giving it an overflow ownership. Not only it gets the ownership to be some sort of a bounding container, or it becomes some sort of a standard for the location. It can go as far as the container. But however, even the overflow like restrictions are according to that parent container. Let's go to Chrome and see that effect. I'm just gonna refresh so that we can lose all the properties. Okay, now overflow means the container, the red circle, it contains the red bordered, the red square, the one with red borders. It contains, let's say, a green circle. So when the green circle moves outside the red square, is it still gonna be visible? At this moment, yes, it's gonna be visible. Let's just set that up. Number 1, let's deal with the containing, with the parent element. Okay, parent element, we're gonna say the parent element relative, position relative. Position relative. That means we have assigned ownership to the parent, ownership of this green cycle. However, if we are trying to move bottom, if we are trying to move, let's say 50 pixel, if we are trying to move the red circle like 50 pixels bottom, it doesn't move, because we need also to set the position of it, let's say to relative. Now it has moved. Now we don't see it. If we want to see it, let's play around with this, you see, with this value. Now we can see we have set the parent container to relative, the position, and also we have set the child, or the targeted element, the target element, which is the green circle, to position relative, and after that we are able to move to position it around. However, as you can see, it can, the fact that the red square is a parent, or it has got ownership, but it doesn't some sort of bind it. It doesn't bind it. It can move over it. It can flow over. So because this has got a position, it doesn't only gain some ownership according to position. And what's that ownership? Very important to note that the ownership in terms of the HTML structure doesn't mean that if you have got a container, a box around an element, it will mean that that element will move and it will bounce, just like in a real life container, in a box. But it means that you can position it according to or relative to that box. Meaning that, for instance, let's just look at here. The fact that the red square has got ownership of the green circle doesn't mean that when you are moving it around, it will move and move and move, just like in real life. It will bounce here and go back, and it will bounce here. That's not true in HTML and CSS, at least for now. However, when you move it over, it will move. But however, this control of this outer container, what it means that when you put 0 here, it goes here 0 according to the red box. When we say, let's say left 50, it has moved, this is 0 left, it has moved 50 pixel to this side. So ownership is just reference. Okay, so where we were, okay, let's just put 0 here. We were saying this as a parent container that has got the ownership, because the red square has a position, so it takes ownership of the orange circle. It doesn't only takes the ownership of the positioning, but it also takes the ownership, the overflow ownership. What do I mean by that? Let's set the overflow property of the red square. Overflow property, I don't know what happened, sorry about that. Okay, overflow to hidden. Overflow to hidden. Now let's go to the target element and move it around. Left, let's say 0 pixel. Let's move it around, move it around, and move it around, and move it around. Voila! Now you can see that as soon as it flows over, now it's like it's cut into half. It's like now it's behind, or the red square serves as an actual boundary, so it can disappear behind like the boundaries of the red square. What does that mean? By putting a position relative to this container, it means that it also owns the overflow. So if overflow is hidden, you are saying that it cannot flow over this box. Now let's change that. Let's take away the ownership on this container, which is this one, the position. If we take away the position of this one and assign it to the orange container, remember we can assign that ownership by positioning it relative or positioning it absolute. Any of those will work. Absolute any of those will work. So let's go to the suppose, okay, suppose this is supposed to have already moved so that it can be governed by this one, but let's see what mistake we might have made. Let's inspect the red one first. Okay, the red one doesn't have the positioning. Yes, let's just remove also this. Okay, now we are sure that the red one is clean, and then that means it doesn't have ownership of this target element. And then the position of the target element, it's relative. Remember what we said about relative. Relative automatically assign the bounding box to be the first parent. This is a child. The first parent of this child is a red box, the second is this one, and the third is this one. So once you say display position this child to relative, automatically we are going to the first parent, which is red, and we make it what? We make it a containing parent. That's why this didn't move. However, if we can change the positioning to absolute, this will be clear when I'm explaining, I think on my slide number 3, when I'm explaining the difference between relative and absolute, it will be very clear. But for now, I want you to understand the effect of setting any element in the any element's position. As soon as you set the position, what is the effect of that, be it on the parent and be it on the child. Now that we have changed this to absolute, then you can see that now this target element or element of interest is positioned according to the orange square, because now the orange square has been assigned a responsibility to become some sort of the parent. How did we do that? We have set the position of it. We have set the position of it. So going forward, also, what about the overflow? There's no overflow here. So at the moment, if we go to the child element and move things around, as you can see that it flows over its own parent. But however, if we change the overflow here, overflow hidden, then let's see what will happen to the target element. Voila, you see. So by setting the position of a parent element, you are not only giving it ownership in terms of the boundary, you are not only saying to it you are the one who can set the boundaries or reference to the boundary, you are also giving it some sort of the ownership of the overflow ownership. So it's very important when you are thinking about CSS positioning, don't automatically think about positioning things around, because you might miss the essence of what this property does to its own element. Like, it affects it more than just positioning. At first, when I was new to HTML and CSS, I thought automatically, if I can set the position of my child element, which is the target element, to relative, and set its left property to 50%, it's gonna move automatically. I have lost sight of the relationship between the parent and the child. So in these past few minutes, I was just giving you an idea on understanding that you don't concentrate on one element, but you must always concentrate on two elements and see what is the effect of position in those elements, because it is different on the child. On the parent, it's more like it assigns responsibility, but on the child, it's more like, on the child, it's more like giving it some sort of a freedom of movement. Maybe a locatability here might not be the some sort of the right word, you know. So here it's more like it's giving it the freedom of movement. When you are saying child, I will set the position to relative or to absolute. You are saying that you can now move, you are granting it an access to move. But however, when you are going to the parent and assigning position to it, relative or absolute, you are saying now you are some sort of a measuring standard for that movement of a child. However, if the parent container is also a child to another container, the same principle that applied to a child inside it are the same principle that are gonna apply to it when it behaves as a child. So it's like if you've got a child, you are going to be a parent to a child, but if you've got a parent, you're gonna behave as a child. So it applies that way. Now that we are done with that, now let's get to, I think, the essence of positioning: relative versus absolute. Okay, now when you're positioning a child element or a target element, which is, let's say, the green circle, to relative, let's go to the practicality, refresh, delete everything. Okay, when I'm positioning this to relative, now I think all those things that I've been explaining before now are going to be clear. That relative thing, where when you put relative, automatically the first parent becomes becomes the first parent element gets ownership. Now I'm gonna explain that clear to you. So refresh again. So there are no styles like position and relative. So we go here. Okay, when we position relative, what does that mean, or what does that say about our first principle? Principle number one, the dual nature. It means that, remember, the dual nature states that whenever you set a position of an element, you must affect two things. Like, it must apply to two things in order for you to understand this whole concept. But now here I've only applied it to what? To the child element. And if I set the left property, without even considering or thinking or affecting the parent, without even defining which outer container is going to be the parent, the red one, the orange one, or the blue one, or the light blue one, without even considering about that, you can see that you can move this child element. Why is that happening? Okay, now we are on the difference between relative and absolute. Relative positioning, by default, it assigns a responsibility. Before, we were assigning responsibility, but by default, when you say relative, it assigns the responsibility to the first parent. It must be the standard for the mobility, for the freedom of movement of the child. That's why here, when we have set position and the left property or bottom or whatever, this moves, because by default this container is a parent. I hope that is clear. By default, when you are setting the relative, you are saying the bounding container, or the container that will be used as a reference or a governing container as far as the position of the internal or of the child element is concerned is going to be the first parent. That's what relative does. And then also by setting the position of a child to relative, this is also what happens when you move the child. It takes some sort of a partial relocation. When you move something from one place to another or one position to another, obviously it relocates from this side to this side. But however, if the position is relative, it's a partial relocation. However, also note that all these things that I'm telling you here, the terms, it's the terms that I've coined myself, I came up with in trying to explain this concept. Maybe you might not hear them somewhere else, or maybe to somebody else they might mean something different, including these principles. Principle number 1, the dual nature of positioning, and also principle number 2, the position effect. So these terms, maybe you might not, maybe to some people they might mean something different. I've came up with these terms so that I can give you clarity, so that you can understand positioning like very well, and also so that it can be more clearer to you. So this term partial relocation means that whenever a child has been given a position relative, it means that number 1, the containing parent, or the first parent, is going to be the one that sets the standard in terms of where it moves. It moves relative to that edge, and also at the same time that child container, it has a partial relocation. It relocates without relocating. It's more like a magic. It's like it's there but it's not there, meaning that when it moves, it leaves behind a ghost position. What do I mean by that? Okay, let's just refresh everything. Let's set the red one now. Position relative, position relative, and then let's say left 100 pixels. As you can see that it was here, but it has moved like 100 pixels from the left side. Okay, yes. And then this one, as a second child, is still remaining in its own position, as if nothing happened here. Okay, now I want you to listen like carefully. In terms of HTML, let me just go to HTML. In terms of HTML, if you've got this container as a parent container, which contains all other elements, let's go to the last one, container number 1. Okay, container number 1 contains circle C1 and circle C2. In HTML, once you have a parent tag and a child tag inside it, or child element inside it in a div, automatically the child elements, this one and this one, are gonna be stacked on top of each other. Obviously I might do a separate video on that, but I want to give you some sort of an idea of what's going on here. It's like you are packing like bricks one on top of each other. Obviously when you are packing bricks on top of each other, gravity is helping you to maintain that order in sequence. always pull those things down so that the weight of this one can be on top of this one and the weight of this one can be on top of this one. Right? Clear. What if you've got 5 bricks, 1 2 3 4 5, and you remove the brick, maybe the 3rd brick? What are you expecting? You are expecting the 2 bricks to move down, some sort of collapse down, because now this is an empty space, isn't it? Yes, that's true. Those are the laws of physics. If you are removing the 3rd brick, these 2 is supposed to collapse down so that you can have 4, the bottom 4 and the top 4, because you have removed the 3rd one. Right. However, okay, in positioning, when we are positioning something like relative, if the child has been positioned relative, let's say these bricks are our children inside a container. If you've positioned brick number 3 relative, when you move it away, when you take it away from the stack, the magic happens in relative. Those 2 bricks don't collapse and go down. Simple like that. They don't collapse. They remain where they are. Remember, I said relative when you apply it to your children, and the children have got some siblings, meaning that they've got some other children. The container doesn't have only one children, it has got the children and the siblings. It will mean that when you remove that child in the flow of the in the DOM, the HTML container, let's say for now, it moves, yes, but these 2 bricks doesn't move down. I hope you understand. So I mean that it has relocated, but without relocating. That's why I said before, there's some sort of magic here, being not there but there at the same time. Physically you can see it can move, but there will be a gap there. That's the effect that the relative has in its children. So it's more like a partial relocation. Physically it has got relocated, but the space that was allocated for it, it's still there. So all the elements that are inside, which is its own sibling, will remain where they are. That so that's why I'm saying it leaves a ghost position, meaning that its position, it looks like it's still there. Let's do the practical. Okay, we have moved the red circle to the left, but however the green circle remains where it is. It doesn't take like the position to be the first element or the first child, because it's relative. Relative keeps the order of the DOM elements. These are DOM elements, or these are HTML elements. The position remains stable on relative, even if you can move this circle around, but the order and the position remains the same, as if when you remove a brick it stays there. However, if this red circle was positioned absolute, obviously I will go to absolute and explain, but now I'm gonna change it to absolute so that you can see that this brick now, it will feel like it's collapsing, it's moving down following the laws of gravity. However, even if this green one moves up for now, please bear with me, I want you to get the concept. Okay, let's see. Let's change everything. Whenever you are positioning a child to absolute, you need to tell the parent. So first we're gonna position this child absolute. Position this child absolute. Okay. Something happened. Even now something happened. What happened? Okay, once we position a child element absolute, it's like we have removed that third bricks. The first brick moves down. So what happens here? You see, where is this green circle disappearing, where it moves to, or what happened, why it just disappeared? It doesn't disappear, but this is what it does. I'm going to show you visually what it does. Let's say bottom, let's say top, 0 pixels. Okay, 0 pixels. It doesn't have a position. Let's say relative. Okay, let's change the top. Okay, when you change the red circle to absolute, it's like you are removing it from the stack, so automatically the green circle has to move up because that position is not there. Think of that gravity. Even though now practically on what I'm saying, on what you see, it feels like the green circle is moving up the stack. It's like we have like some sort of flipped the order of gravity. It doesn't matter, but think about it as that brick that we have removed and this thing fall. Now the trick is when you remove the red one, it's like it's not falling but moving up. So please be aware of the difference, the flipping around things. Even though in terms of gravity and the bricks it's going down, but here what you see, the green circle moves up to take the first position. So this is what happens practically when you set this to absolute. It doesn't move partially, it moves completely, even giving away that ghost position, giving away everything. It's completely not there, hence the green circle moves to take that position. However, because the red one is on top of it, it feels like the green one is disappearing. It's not disappearing, it just moves under it. So this is what happens practically. When you set the red one to absolute, this one moves, but however it moves to the back of that one. It moves here because it feels like the red one is not there, so it's taking that position. Start from scratch so that I can explain it clearly. The red one, position, absolute. What happened to the green one? It has moved to take the position of a red one. How can we see that? Let's move the red one to the left. Okay, to the left, let's say 2 pixels. You see? So what happened here, because we have set the red one to absolute, it has just moved up and the green one occupied that position. But now the reason why it feels like the green one is disappearing, it's because of the red one is still there. But once you change the position of the red one, you can see that now the green one has taken that position. But in relative, that doesn't happen. So if you've got 4 elements and you set the third one from the bottom to relative, these ones will remain where they are, just like these fingers. Yes, you can see the fingers, just like these fingers. However, if this is absolute, once you remove it, this one will collapse. So that's what relative does. So back to this one, we were saying relative has got some sort of a partial relocation. The element moves, but the gap is not closed. That means it leaves a ghost position. However, in absolute, it doesn't leave a ghost position. It moves entirely, meaning that it doesn't feel like it takes its part of the stacked bricks. Just like when you remove the one brick number 3 on the stack of bricks, it's not there at all. So absolute does that. It's not there at all. Relative has got a default parent. Automatically the first one becomes the becomes the, what's this thing, the becomes the bounding parent. But however, on absolute, you have to tell us on absolute which one will be the parent. So that was relative. Relative has got the direct parent becomes the parent, and then also it has got a partial relocation, or it leaves a ghost position. That's why the bricks don't collapse, the HTML element don't collapse. But however, when it comes to absolute, then it behaves differently. Now let's go to my, I think it's my last slide on absolute. Positioning absolute doesn't automatically have a default parent. You must tell us which is the parent. You must give us. However, all of them, they've got a default parent, which is the body. The body, the HTML element, tag element, which is the body, is the default one if you don't specify. So this means that when you position your child to absolute, you've got a responsibility to tell us which is the parent. So it doesn't take a parent by default. So any element can be a parent. Okay, and then let's test that, refresh. Okay, now we're gonna use the red one. It's already here, the red circle. So let's say position absolute. As you can see, it has disappeared because we didn't specify the parent container. And also not only we didn't specify the container, it has disappeared because it doesn't have some sort of a location. We have not let's set the left to 0. You see, we haven't specified the location. It does have a default container. For instance, let me set the right so that you have an idea of what's going on. You see, it has a bounding container, which is the body. That's why it's here. But the reason why it disappeared is because we didn't tell where it is now. We've just said display absolute, yes, but relative to the outside container, where am I gonna be positioned? Am I gonna be positioned 20 pixels from the edge of the parent container? So that's why it has disappeared. So now let's tell let's give some sort of, let's assign a responsibility of ownership to one of these HTML element, and then let's go to the orange one and set position. Remember, we can assign relative, we can assign absolute, it doesn't matter. You see, still nothing happened. But now let's go to the okay, I want to see, yeah, let's go to the red one, the one that was absolute. Let's say now right, just like before, let's say 20, suppose something, okay, 20 pixel. As you can see now, the 20 pixel is according to the orange what, the orange parent, the orange square, the square with the orange border. Also at the same time, on absolute, you can see that this has moved to take this position. However, maybe with one circle, that movement you cannot, it's not easy to see. Now I'm gonna add like 3 circles here so that you can see exactly what we are talking about. So I'm just gonna make some changes on my HTML file. I'm opening and closing it. Okay, I'm opening and closing it. Okay, this container, the red one, is too small for me to stack the circle, maybe 4 of them, so I'm gonna remove it. Let's remove this one so that the parent container of the circle now becomes the orange circle. And then I'm gonna add 2 more circle number 3 and circle number 4, circle number 3 and circle number 4. And also I'm gonna change the colors for circle 3 and circle 4, meaning that I'm just gonna say C3 and C4. Just copy this. Let's say C3, make it pink. I can just make it blue and make this yellow. Let's see what happened. Now, as you can see, we have three circles here. Where is my circle number 4? Let me check what happened. It's red, green, blue, yellow is not there. Okay, yellow is not there because it's not circle number 4. Yellow is not there because it's not circle number 4. Okay. Also, as you can see, I've said before, when you put elements inside a div, automatically they are stacked one on top of each other. But that's not what is happening here. Here they are lined up one next to each other. So maybe you might ask why they are not stacked one on top of each other. Let's see what I have done. Let's remove that CSS property so that things can happen like by default. If you put some elements inside some divs, inside another div, automatically they are stacked one on top of each other. But however, here I have applied a CSS property which is display flex, and I have centered everything. So that's why now you see they are lining up. So let me quickly remove that effect, that centering effect on this orange one. On this orange one, let's go to this element. As you can see that it has got a class center, and this class center centers things inside this. So in this outside square, this one, the blue one, I have centered this orange square, and then inside this orange square I have centered the children of this orange square, and also I have regulated the order and the flow. They must be horizontal, one next to each other. So I'm just going to break that so that what's happening here can be consistent with what I've said before about the divs and stacking one on top of each other. So let's go to container number 2. Let's remove this centering thing. Okay, as you can see now I have removed the centering thing. Also, let me remove it on my actual page so that okay, here, sorry, this container we are removing the centering thing. Sorry for that. We are removing this. When we are removing this is what we are actually, these are the properties that we are removing: display flex, align item center, and justify content center. So let's save this and refresh this one. Voila, automatically things are stacked. Now the brick concept is more like coming to shape. So now we've got our bricks, even though our bricks are more like circle. Let's say these are stones, yeah, because the bricks are supposed to be more like rectangular. Yeah, well, but I hope you get the concept. So these are our bricks. Then what I'm gonna do, brick number 1, brick number 2, brick number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let me just add the last one so that this can conform to my brick analogy, because I said 5 bricks and I'm gonna remove the third one. Okay, let's say brick number 5. To me it feels more natural when you come up with an analogy, and then even when you are doing it practically, you some sort of do the same thing instead of theoretically saying this and then practically doing that. So let's just do brick number 5 and I say black. Okay, voila. Now we've got 5 bricks, and then we want brick number 3. 1, 2, 3, the blue one. What we're gonna do, we're gonna use relative to move this brick from this place maybe to here, and see if these bricks are gonna collapse. Then let's go to this brick, position relative. What does that mean? Automatically the bounding container is the first parent, which is the orange square, and then we're gonna say left, let's say 50. You see, what does that mean? It means that, go back to our slide, it means that number one, we are done with this. It means that it has got a partial relocation. It's not there, but it's still there because the position collapsed